In this video, we will continue to talk about VRAY for 3ds Max, and we saw how to import assets from the external of 3ds Max. In the previous video, we used different models from different websites, and we saw the differences between using a 3ds Max format file with VRAY already set up for us, and how we can also import other types of formats like FBX or OBJ, and what's the difference between all these different formats, essentially how to do this process the easier way and the harder, so the more complex. So we saw Sketchfab as an example. We downloaded this abandoned warehouse from this author right here. So if you want to use the same scene, you can look for it. And remember to create an account if you want to download 3D models and 3D scenes from Sketchfab. So we're gonna use this, we're gonna try to fix it. And we also downloaded this little object with this lamp, this table with this lamp. And we saw that we had problems with materials. We're gonna talk about materials also in this video. And we talk about TurboSquid. So this is a model from TurboSquid. It's another website. And this was from Sketchfab. And another website we saw is Polyoven, which has a lot of 3D models. And this is where we get the ship from. So this one we downloaded in the FBX format. So we didn't need to convert from a file like GLTF, which is open source, or Blender for 3ds Max. So we didn't need to convert this in FBX. We found it already in FBX with all the materials. All we did was converting the materials from standard or physical materials into VRAY materials. So we saw all these operations in the previous video. We brought all these assets inside our scene to work with them. Now in this video, we're gonna concentrate more on the first, we're gonna concentrate on the warehouse, and then we're gonna move on and also see some other importing options, because we have libraries of models in VRAY Cosmos that we can use. So let's get here into the scene. And here we added also a VRAY plane. We're gonna delete everything, but we're gonna keep the VRAY plane, and we're gonna keep the warehouse so we can work with the warehouse mainly. And the first thing you can see here, I need to scale it. So we also saw that every time we import a model from external, we need to fix it a little bit in terms of scale, in terms of rotating it, in terms of also changing sometimes the geometry into polygonal models. Now in other video courses we talk about how to create scenes and how to create 3D models in various software, so you can check the channel, look for these other lessons and courses. Now in this scene that we exported, we converted this using Blender from the Blender format into 3ds Max. We use the FBX to convert it, and you can see that we also imported the free directional light, which we used also in the previous video. So we can now access the geometry, which is going to be editable poly, as you can see. And if it's not, you can convert everything into editable poly. And we also have the light for us, the directional light. Now I'm using the Chaos Cosmos browser. You can see I clicked on the icon to open it up, but it's telling me that it cannot be reached. Now to solve this problem, I can go into my Windows here and just type Chaos Cosmos and open up the app from there. And this is gonna try to connect with the internet. So if it gives you this issue right here, you can close it up and you can access that from the Windows start menu. So you type Chaos Cosmos browser right there. So you click on the app directly, and this usually solve the problem. So try to close and reopen Chaos Cosmos browser from the toolbar. We'll find the icon, and now it works. So you should see this interface right here, showing you some 3D models. This is the home page. You can always update because they are always uploading new assets, new materials, new models, and we will see also everything we can find in Chaos Cosmos. So it's updating right now. It's downloading more samples, more previews of models that we can use, and that's success. So we finished to update. So from time to time, go there and update so that you can get the latest assets. And we can see in the left side, we have the materials, we have the 3D models, we have the home page there. So right here, these are materials. So if you click on one of these, it's going to start to download it. And it's going to show you the percentage of downloading. Now, once it's ready, it's going to appear with this green button and also down there at the bottom of the browser. There we go. So you can continue to click and download other materials. And if you want to apply, you can click on that arrow there. You can use triplanar mapping, which is a particular type of mapping used in VRAY to blend the surfaces with the material. And you can also use real-world scale, which is a kind of mapping to map the material on your object. Now, if you are not familiar with materials, mapping, and all these topics, you can check the 3ds Max video course talking about materials. So when you click on the arrow, it's going to apply it. You can see there on the surface that you have selected, all the surfaces that you have selected. It's going to appear there in the preview. And you can see it's pretty big. So those bricks look really big. So we need to fix that. We need to fix the mapping. We need to adjust. As usual, there's always some adjusting to do. So don't think that you're gonna get things the easy way every time. So sometimes you need to work your way out. And again, I'm downloading these other bricks. Once it's downloaded, I can press. You can also click and drag directly on the surface, and then it's gonna appear there in the preview. Remember that materials and texture needs to be visible in the viewport in order to be shown in the perspective there. It should be in high quality mode. Now we can fix the mapping going into the modifier tab and type the map scaler, which is one of the easiest and fastest way you can fix the tiling and the repetition of the texture. So that is to say the scale. And you can see now it looks fine. So you can use that to fix the problem. And now we can move to the pavement. So I'm gonna select here, for example, another material. You can see many categories there: concrete, fabric, metal, ground, stone, and so on. So you need to go. You need to look for what you need. When you find it, you can click there, download it, as usual, and you can continue to click on many different spheres here of the materials, and you can see all the downloaded file in the downloaded section of Chaos Cosmos. So next to the online, which is the library, which gives you all the materials and assets that are going to be available. Next to that, you have downloaded. So this is going to show you only the downloaded object. And again, you can assign, you can click and drag. Now we're going to see many more things about Chaos Cosmos. So I'm going to create here a new scene, and I'm going to start with VRAY here in the geometries. You can see that we have different objects in the VRAY geometry, and we have the VRAY proxy. Now the VRAY proxy is something that we can do manually, but it's kind of a standard when you use Chaos Cosmos. We're going to talk about proxies later, just to show you that also you have an extra geometry section there dedicated to VRAY. But in this case, I just want to create a simple plane with the standard 3ds Max geometry. And again, for everything that concerns 3ds Max, if you're interested, please check our video course in 3ds Max and the lessons about 3ds Max. We're not going to focus on 3ds Max right here. We're going to focus on VRAY. So I'm going to open up the Cosmo browser there, purple icon again, and quickly assign a material to this plane. So you can do this working directly in 3ds Max, or you can do it as you saw with imported models. So These are the downloaded materials that I have downloaded so far. And you can use this with Corona, by the way, if you have Corona installed. And now let's move to the 3D models, because we have also a lot of 3D models. So not only we have materials, but we can also use 3D models. And we have furniture, we have accessories, vegetation, lighting, vehicles, people, architecture, materials, and also Hdr Eyes, which are not models actually, but they're kind of a sphere that's gonna wrap around your scene to have a background. But we're gonna make an example of that. Down there, you can browse by space, so living room, kitchen, bedroom, bathroom, office, restaurant, urban, retail, country. And so you have many ways you can reach the asset that you're looking for. So you can see here, again, these are categories for materials. So let's assign here a nice wood flooring for the plane to start, and then we're gonna also insert some people and some objects. We're gonna try with some 3D models. So I'm looking for a nice floor, wooden floor for my pavement there. And you can see some of these are shiny, some of these are not. So depending on how the material was created. And we're also gonna see how we can create customized materials later on. But you will find a lot of materials, as you can see here. So if you don't want to waste your time spending time to create your own materials, finding the texture, searching the texture, you just get here, select the material, just click on the arrow there and assign it. You can also, again, click and drag the material directly into the surface that you want the material to be assigned. Okay, so again, you have the option here to use the triplanar mapping or the real world scale. So you can see the difference. Now it has a different scaling basically, but don't worry about that. If you find it difficult or you cannot scale it in a appropriate way, you can always go to the modifier and assign a map scaler right there. So, and you scale it just by changing the scale in centimeters. So you can use this or try with the real world map scale. So this is simple because this is a simple plane. It doesn't have a complex mapping. We're gonna see also later on that you can also find some more complex situations. Now let's get to let's start to bring in some other assets here. So we're gonna talk about Hdr Eyes in a minute. Let's go to the collections here, or living room. You can see here we have a lot of pieces of furniture, a lot of furnishing that we can assign. Hdr Eyes, you can see these are all for exterior scene because we have like skies and backgrounds for exterior scene, but you have day, evening there, and you also have studio. Now in our case, in this example, we're gonna use a studio setup. We don't need something external, we need something more internal. So these are different studio setup. So when it's finished, you can click and insert it into the scene, and it's gonna appear here like a dome light or like a V-Ray light, which has the characteristic to be a dome light, which is not exactly represented as a sphere, but it will look like a sphere because it's gonna add a spherical background, which is called an environmental map. But we're gonna get back to that also later on in the course when we're gonna see something more complex. Now I'm just gonna look for here some furniture. You can see here you have filters. You can search by colors. So if I select blue, it's gonna show me all the blue assets, all the blue chairs and sofas and office chair. You can also use filters for the spaces, for the indoor spaces. So this is gonna be the living room. You have bathroom, you have office, and so you have also possibility to change the surface, so where the object is gonna go. ceiling, floor, whatever. You can sort by the date added or most popular and so on. So you can use filters if you want to narrow down your search. And when you find what you are interested in, you can just again click and download, or you can click and drag, and it's gonna automatically download it into the library and insert it into your scene. You can see there, I'm continuing to click on different assets, continuing to download. So in this first part, I'm just gonna browse around here, the Chaos Cosmos browser, and I'm gonna download assets, and then I'm gonna bring them into the scene in a second time. So I'm just using here, for example, the surface floor as a filter. So it's gonna show me all the lamps because I am in the lighting section. So these are actually objects that emit light. These are actually lights. So they are not like simple 3D models, but they are also, they come with a light that is embedded inside the 3D model. So it's gonna also emit light. And you have vegetation. You have a lot of models here for vegetation, which are really interesting. You have accessories to, you know, make your rendering a little bit more realistic, because the more details you add to your render, the more it's gonna look real and live. It's gonna look realistic. But be careful not to insert too many of these, because these are they are all composed by polygons, so they're gonna tend to increase the heaviness of your scene in terms of GPU. So you use the video graphic card when you work in the perspective there in the workspace in 3ds Max, but they're also gonna increase the heaviness of your rendering. So be careful with that. Now, these are really complex models, especially when we talk about vegetation. They start to become really complex and heavy, but also vehicles, they look really outstanding, really beautiful, but they are really heavy to render. They contain a lot of meshes, a lot of polygons. So, well, you can download something here. I'm gonna search for something that's gonna contain some reflective material, just to show you also something about the reflections. And then you have people standing, sitting, walking. So again, these are pretty realistic, so they have a lot of polygons there. But Chaos Cosmos uses something called Proxy. If you don't know what it is, we're gonna talk about proxies also later, but essentially it's a simplification of the asset. And then we have architecture section here. So let's download this cafe stand, and you also have this building here. Well, there are not many things, few things here in the architecture, but they're gonna update it later probably. So everything is kind of working in progress, but it's pretty promising here. We have a lot of models that you can use. So if I go in my downloaded section now, I have downloaded a lot of stuff, so I can start to bring in something in my scene. And I'm gonna start with this motorcycle. So I want to have kind of a industrial design object that it's gonna contain some shiny material. You can also right click. If you right click, you have also these options, these extra options. If you want to use the images there, you can save the image. You can also click with the left mouse. It's gonna show you some details about the polygons and the structure, so you can understand how heavy is that particular model in terms of polygons and in terms of subdivisions. And what else? Well, you can use filters also in the downloaded section, and you have also the likes section when you can store everything that you like. So if you click on the little art on the bottom right of the image, you can save those as favorites. Okay, now let's jump into the scene. So we have inserted a material, a Hdr Eye, which is going to be represented by the dome VRAY light, and also a 3D model, which is going to be our motorcycle here. So we are ready to run the first render. we have everything we need. We have background, we have lighting, we have materials, we have 3D models. So we have basically something to test our Cosmos assets. And there it is. So it looks nice, looks pretty realistic. You can see all the shiny materials, they reflect what's around the scene. So if you have a black background or a white background, as we saw previously, well, the reflections are gonna be pretty boring. But in this case, I'm not using a blank or a white or a standard background. I'm not using just the color. I'm using an HDR Eye, which is that image, that spherical background that it's behind my scene, and that's what is causing the reflections to be so realistic. And you know, they have like a variety of colors and different light source coming from different directions. So everything is gonna make things a little bit more interesting and realistic. Now, if we go into the render setup, also let's lock the render to the perspective as we saw previously in other videos. So we are using interactive rendering again, as we saw in other videos. We can see the scene is too bright, so we can go and decrease the multiplier parameter in the dome light in the VRAY Hdr Eyes Studio. So you can see now it looks a little bit better. Now you always need to balance the lighting to create a more realistic effect, but we're going to talk about Hdr Eyes, we're going to talk about materials, we're going to talk about other parameters later on, so more advanced features of VRAY later on. This is just the beginning. We are just beginning to experiment with the different tools and the libraries of VRAY. So we can now close the VRAY frame buffer, and let's go here in the viewport. So here we can change the quality. You can see we are using high quality to see the materials and textures, and this is the default shading right now. Now if you go to lighting and shadows, you can see if you're using shadows and ambient occlusion, and if you go into materials, you can set up realistic materials with maps if the materials and textures are not showing properly. So that's a way you can see things in the viewport and, you know, work a little bit with the mapping and the rest of the things concerning the materials. Now we can see that when we select the model, this is called VRAY Proxy. So this model here, it's actually a proxy, which is a simplification of the actual model, which is stored in your computer. And you can see there the mesh file, it's stored in a particular folder, but we're gonna talk about, again, VRAY Proxy later. This is just to show you that when you use Chaos Cosmos, this is automatic. When you insert a model, you can see this is a simplification. If you go and see the structure in the wireframe views, you can see that it contains a lot less polygons than the actual polygons. If you go there in the proxy parameters, you can change the preview. You can change from a simple preview to the complete model, and you can see there that when the model is complete, it has a lot more polygons, a lot of more details to make it look so realistic. So you can see what's the difference there. Now when we use proxy, which is a simplification, so we don't use show whole mesh, but we use the preview from file. This is gonna make things a lot faster in our viewports there. So we can use the workspace in 3ds Max with more speed and with more flow, with more fluidity than when we use all the polygons. This is to help us work in 3ds Max faster. And if we go there, high quality, you saw you can switch to IPR, which is interactive rendering, directly into the viewport. So this is a option that you can do. So if you don't want to use the VRAY frame buffer, you can render directly into the viewport. And especially if you use proxy, you can see that everything is gonna stay pretty lightweight. It's not gonna be heavy when you move around your scene. And also you can really in a fast way render the scene into your viewport. So this is also an extra feature, which is pretty interesting and gonna help you to work. Now let's get back to the Chaos Cosmos. I'm gonna add here some of the models that I have already downloaded. So I'm just gonna click in the green arrow. I'm gonna add all this stuff inside my scene. So I'm gonna add a chair, I'm gonna add people, I'm gonna add some pieces of furniture, table, and so on. So let's add also, I want to add some people that is seated, so I can do some different examples. People walking and some vegetation, some accessories to insert some extra detail to make things a little bit more interesting. So you can download a lot of stuff and then come back later. You can filter there, you can choose lighting, you can choose furniture, you can choose vegetation. So you have categories either in the online section when you need to download it, or in the downloaded section when you need to insert it into your scene. So right here, I'm gonna insert also some plants, some vegetation, some indoor vegetation to make things, again, a little bit more interesting. And so let's also add some, well, for the moment, I think that's gonna be enough. So you can see that when you bring everything inside your scene, everything is gonna go there in the middle of your world, of your 3D world in 3ds Max. So I'm gonna click and move these around a little bit to showcase everything correctly. And you can see everything, it's a proxy, so everything is a simplified representation of the actual 3D models. So this is gonna make things easier. And VRAY Viewport Ipr, it's on, so you can see that everything it's real time. So I'm doing essentially a real-time rendering of my scene using all these really complex models thanks to the proxy feature, to the proxy technology. And when you switch into high quality, sometimes you will see that checkerboard. That means that it's calculating the textures. So just give it some time and they're gonna look fine. And so here I'm just placing some vegetation around some extra object. Now another interesting feature you can use is place and move, which is that icon right there on the top, which is gonna help you to bring things directly connected or placed directly on a surface. And then I'm gonna use rotate. Now these are all tools that you will find in 3ds Max, and again, if you're interested, check the 3ds Max video course. So you can move it, you can rotate it, you can scale it, you can move and place using all the polygons, all the faces that you have in the scene. When you're ready, you can get back there and run a IPR, so an interactive rendering, directly into the viewport and see how everything is going so far. And I think that, you know, we are just at the beginning and this is already looking great. Thanks to Chaos Cosmos, thanks to materials, objects, Hdr Eyes that we find in Chaos Cosmos, we can rapidly create a really interesting scene. Now, we didn't use a complex, let's say, interior in this case. We just use a studio Hdr Eye. So that's showing us also the power of using Hdr Eye, and we're gonna get back to that later. But here you can also change the viewport IPR rendering. So you can do, for example, a render without the materials if you want to concentrate on the lighting, or for example, you want to concentrate on the ambient occlusion effect. You can isolate that render element, that render layer, or you can do this wireframe. You can use the normals if you want to see the normals. UVs, these are for the mapping. And well, these are basically different ways you can analyze your rendering directly in the viewport, in the 3ds Max viewport. And you can also isolate objects, so you can do an isolated or rendering of the selected object, which is also pretty interesting features if you want to speed up your rendering and concentrate only on one part. You don't want to waste time to render all the scene every time. And so these are the assets that you find in Chaos Cosmos just to get you started and to enrich your scenes. You just need to wait with the interactive rendering just a little bit if you want to have some extra quality. You need to wait for the interactive render to make some passes, and you can see there now it's looking better. Now, together with the Chaos Cosmos, you also have the VRAY Material Library browser that you find also in the toolbar, and there you will find many more materials that you can use. You can find Chaos Cosmos and the material library there. They are together in the toolbar. So these are excellent resources that you can use, especially when you are a beginner, when you are starting to use VRAY for 3ds Max. So I hope you enjoyed this lesson, and if you did, please subscribe to the channel. And if you want to give us a little support, you can join as a supporter for the channel. Check our other courses and see you in the next video.